So moonshot to me is these things that we look to and thinking they are so audacious, that they are crazy ideas. They're so difficult, if not impossible to achieve. And what I've learned in the life is that never look at the problem, whether it can or cannot be done. Simply ask yourself, what has to happen? What problems will have to be solved for this to work? So whether it doesn't matter when someone say, I want to live on Venus. You don't say that will never happen. You simply say, what are the things that have to happen for us to be able to live on Venus, right? So you say, okay, you have to be able to leave Earth orbit. So you have to first find a way to leave the Earth. Okay, that's one problem. Second problem is to leave once you get out of the Earth orbit to go all the way to Venus. Okay, that's a second problem. The third is you have to be able to land on the Venus. All right, that's a third problem. The fourth thing is when you get there, how are you going to actually make a living? How are you going to grow the food on the moon? How are you going to grow the food on the Venus? And you start asking all those questions, right? And then you start to say, all right, now that we know there are 4 sets of problems, we say the problem number 1, how to leave the Earth orbit. Well, guess what? We have done that many, many times. We know how to do that. It's called a rocket. So we say, great, that problem is solved. How do we go from the Earth orbit all the way to Venus? And we said, look, we have been to Mars and Venus is farther out, but look, we know how to go to the Mars, and maybe there is some incrementally slightly more challenging work we may have to do, but it doesn't seem like a very difficult task to do. We can probably get there. And then same thing, you say, how are you going to land? They say, look, we land on Mars and we tried 3 different ways. All of them work. A bouncing ball, we use the balloon, we use the crane, and all of them work. And maybe the atmosphere on the Venus is slightly thinner than Mars, but at least we know how to do that. And then comes down to how are you going to grow the food on the Venus if you're going to live there? And that's where you start to actually, the part of learning about moonshot is about asking the right questions. The questions you ask is the problem you solve. And just take this home. So I'm going to repeat it. Whenever you're trying to solve a problem, be asking a different question than everyone has asked allows you to look at the problem so differently and come up with a solution that have never been possible. So instead of asking yourself, how are you going to grow the food on the Venus? What if you were to ask a slightly different question? Why do we eat food? Think like a 2-year-old naive person. Why do we even eat food? And by simply asking that question, you say, oh, we need food because we need energy and we need nutrition. And suddenly you say, what are the different ways we can get energy? Plants get energy from photosynthesis, which is taking a sunlight and converting them to energy. There are many bacteria who grow up in a radioactive nuclear waste. What does that mean? That means they have figured out how to protect their DNA from radiation and use the radiation as a source of energy. Now, imagine if you can take that genetic material from those bacteria, use CRISPR to modify our own gene. Now we become radiation resistant, and we can now actually just use the radiation as a source of energy. So instead of saying, honey, do you want to go out and eat pizza? You say, honey, do you want to go out for a walk and get some radiation? And that's your dinner, right? Now, what I'm trying to say is just asking a different question allows you to look at the possibilities that were never, ever thought about it. And that is the crux of how you solve moonshot. And I think, Tab, I don't know if last time I mentioned that to you or not, I use a framework for every single time I start a company that I would call an audacious company. Ask myself, why this? Why now? Why me? And why this is really simple. You ask yourself backward, God forbid, I am actually successful in solving the problem that I set out to do. Would it help 1 billion people live a better life? And the reason you ask yourself that is anytime you can do anything that will improve 1 billion people's life, you can create $100 billion or $500 billion company. But you don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to start a $500 billion company. What should I do? The making money is simply a byproduct of doing things that improve people's life. Is that simple? And that's how you focus on. So every day now I wake up, and I'm going to later talk about Wyoming, is the same thing. Another moonshot I knew nothing about. And one of the things I also learned is when you become good at something, when you become an expert at anything, you become useless. You become incrementalist. That means the best you can do is to be 10% better than someone else, but you will never be 10 times better. To be 10 times better, you have to challenge the foundation of everything that experts have taken it for granted. That means to be a non-expert is the biggest asset you have. So every time someone says, how can you go out and do something in this industry? You know nothing about it. You say, that is my biggest asset, is to I know nothing about it. That is why I'm going to be the most dangerous person the industry has ever seen, because I'm no longer bound by their thinking of what is not possible.